What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and so I'm obviously making a video today. First of all, I'm less sick today. You might be able to tell a little bit of a difference in my voice and such. I don't sound so stuffed up and stuff, so it's good. Congratulations to me. you know. So you know, tomorrow is our first preseason game. And you know, there's no practice today, at least not open to the media. You know, I don't know if they're doing practice closed. I don't think they're doing practice today. I'm pretty sure there is no practice today, just period, since it's the day before the game, but you never know. Anywho, there is news though, and you know, I wanted to use this time because I expected there to be nothing today, so I wanted to use this time to discuss the depth chart that was released recently. Since I haven't been able to do that, I wanted to take this opportunity to discuss the depth chart, go over it a little bit, you know, and give my thoughts. There is some other news actually that broke today that is rather interesting, so we'll talk about that as well. First and foremost though, I want to apologize because I had told you guys in my last video that I was gonna put, you know, the interviews from yesterday and the day before at the end of the video. Unfortunately, I mean, there's always something, right? There's always something, but I have some issues with the software that I use to record the videos, so I gotta look into that. I'm working on it. Bear with me. So those will be suspended for now indefinitely until I figure this out, which I will at some point. I gotta try some things. I gotta do some stuff, you know, work. Anyway, that's for me to figure out and whatever. I just wanted to let you guys know that at this point I am going to stop, at least for a little while, the interviews. I know you guys like it, so I'm definitely going to sort that out so I can get them back for you. But just wanted to let you guys know. So before I get into the depth chart, let me go ahead and talk about, because I want to try and keep this as short as possible, but it definitely does need to be discussed. So the other thing, the thing that kind of came up today is there are lots of reports talking about how Kenny Stills has spoken up against Stephen Ross. The reason why is because Stephen Ross has had a fundraiser for Donald Trump and his re-election campaign. And look, you know, I have to say, I mean, first of all, most of what I actually have seen, a lot of the reporting that I have seen on it was actually quite good. You know, at least most of the headlines and stuff, because I read a couple articles, but most of them I didn't, obviously. So, you know, the headlines, you know, looked all right. And what I read looked all right, you know. I mean, because basically, you know, they're you know, they explain, you know, basically what happened. They show his tweets and stuff like that. And, you know, basically all it was he sent out a tweet saying, you know, you can't have an organization like Rise with the mission statement that it does and then, you know, host a fundraiser for Donald Trump and his re-election campaign. And that's absolutely true. And look, honestly, I'm going to say this, but Stephen Ross is done for me, right? Because for a couple reasons. So, first of all, look, I have said this on many occasions. Stephen Ross has done wonderful things, right? He put up, you know, almost all his own money for the stadium, right? But he rebuilt the stadium. He was one of the only owners that advocated for the Raiders not to go to Vegas, right? because he felt like, you know, it shouldn't be the taxpayers having to build the stadiums, and he's one of the proponents for the owners having to pay for their stadiums. You know, he's the past few years he's done voter registration drives, you know, blah blah blah. Like, he's done, and he does so much. You know, him and the Dolphins do so much in the community. You know, their community or whatever, you know, so much community service and charity work and stuff like that, and that's wonderful, right? They raise a ton of money for cancer and blah blah blah. And look, I'm not taking away those things, but at the end of the day, I'm sorry, I can't support a dude who supports Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, he's a billionaire. Stephen Ross is a billionaire. The dude is loaded. And at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure that, you know, he got helped out by Donald Trump's tax cuts. So, I mean, I know he did. He's a billionaire. And those tax cuts were for the 1% at the very top. The richest people in the world, right? So, and in this country. So, I guarantee, and, you know, he did clarify. There have been some, you know, pretty quick updates to this story. Stephen Ross did clarify. He says that, and I'm sorry, look, I don't care what anybody says. These two things do not go together. He says that he himself is not a racist, but Donald Trump's racism is not a deal breaker for him. Look, and with the way he put it, you know, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, he's just doing business and blah, blah, blah. Nah. I'm sorry. Donald Trump is a fucking racist, and if you support him, then at the very least, while you might not be racist, you know, sure, it's possible that, you know, he himself is not a racist person, and he himself may not harbor malicious feelings towards immigrants or people of color or women, you know, whatever, right? Because Donald Trump is also a misogynist and a bigot. So, you know, you might not harbor those feelings, and you might not seek to take action against those people. And Stephen Ross has, for the most part, proven that he is on the side of fighting for equality and so on. But if you support, but the problem with that, and the reason why this is enough for me to be done with him, is because he supports a person that is not only blatantly racist, bigoted, misogynist, xenophobic, all those things. Not only is he blatantly, you know, a terrible person, but he's the leader right now, as it stands, the leader of this country, who's running amok, being lawless, and just doing whatever the fuck he wants, pushing for, you know, fascism as fast as he possibly can. Him and the Republican Party, along with the establishment Democrats, are pushing for fascism as soon as humanly possible in this country. He's got so much control and power, right? And so when you support a person who, you know, look, because Stephen Ross, his organization and his policies might not be to be racist or whatever, but it doesn't matter, because the leader of the country, the person who, I mean, he doesn't write laws and stuff, but he's not supposed to, right? You know, that's the job of Congress and our lawmakers. Our elected representatives in the House and the Senate are the ones supposed to deal with, you know, law, but that doesn't seem to stop him any, right? He just does whatever the fuck he wants. And it's, look, you can't support a guy like that and then claim, you know, that's like the stupid fucking bullshit of being like, oh, well, you know, I got a black friend, so I'm not racist. Bitch, that doesn't make you not racist just because you have, you know, one black dude that, you know, might happen to have a fucking more conservative view and also might hate black people, other black people. Like, get the fuck, like, you know, like these fucking, you know, jackasses that, anyway, we're getting way into politics, and I follow politics closely, and I'm huge into it, but this is not obviously the purpose of this channel. So, I'm gonna regress a little bit here, or digress a little bit here, rather, and because I want to move on to the next thing. But it's a big deal. The other thing, though, of course, is obviously more related to the team and whatever. He just doesn't make good football decisions. And so, I've been saying that for a while. I said that if Stephen Ross does not get it right with this regime, i.e. if this regime, for example, has a bad couple, 2 or 3 seasons, and then they get fired before Flores' contract is up, before they get a full 5-year window and a legit opportunity to, show if they can do it, and if he keeps, if he continues to make, bad decisions throughout, with drafts and so on and so forth, blah, 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 what have you, because he does have a say in drafts. I mean, let's be honest, right? Then I was going to advocate for him stepping down as majority owner of the Dolphins. Well, now you add in this, and this is actually like something, right? Because football is superficial. It's just entertainment. It's fun for us as fans. Obviously, it's a lot more for the guys who play it and for the coaches and stuff, whatever. It's a job. It's their passion, blah, blah, blah. And for us, it might be a passion too. But for us, it is just fun. It is entertainment. And so that's why it is superficial. The other stuff is fundamentally morally important. And so I don't want Stephen Ross as the Miami Dolphins owner anymore. He has shown me enough on the football side of it to have me convinced of that. And now with this added extra thing, and honestly, I'm not going to lie, there have been a couple of occasions in the past where, and I can't think of what they are off the top of my head because admittedly they are few and far between, but I do recall, at least recall having felt, strange about certain things that Stephen Ross had done or said, right? So, and frankly, if I'm being honest, a lot of people were making hype, big hype over the fact that Stephen Ross hired a black head coach, right? And giving him props for that. And, he was the only, he's the only one or whatever, some shit like that. And good, right? That's good. But there was this little bit of me, I'm just being honest, and this is not factual. Like, this doesn't mean anything, right? It's not based in anything other than just, maybe 1 or 2 anecdotes and, just my brain, evaluating and investigating, certain, various different possibilities, right? Because one thing that my brain is just wired to do without me even really trying is and why I consider myself, such a logical person is because it, part of what I do, or part of what it does a lot of things, but part of what it does is evaluates as many different scenarios as possible, like when I'm thinking about, different problems or what have you, right? Like, for example, if I'm trying to solve a problem for something, anything, I try and evaluate, all the various different possible outcomes and scenarios based off of different factors and inputs, right? I try and prepare for the worst and hope for the best kind of stuff, right? So, what I was thinking is that, he might be trying too hard, right? Like he might be trying to play this card of almost kind of like what I said before about, oh, well, I have a black friend, so I can't be racist. Again, and I'm not saying that Stephen Ross is racist, and the facts would point to the opposite, but he does support a guy who is blatantly racist and the policies that that guy supports, which a lot of are blatantly racist. So, you know, it could be like an attempt to be like, yeah, hey guys, I'm not racist. Look, I hired a black coach. And I was like the only person to do it. Now, because of my perspective of Stephen Ross and because of the things that I know that he has done and said publicly, I would lean heavily towards him not being a racist himself. So when he says, you know, hey, I'm not a racist, but that dude's racism is not a deal breaker for me. Well, at the end of the day, I mean, if I'm just being honest, you're at least a little bit racist. Because that means that you don't have a problem with his hateful rhetoric about immigrants, calling them rapists and murderers, even though they commit far less crime than natural-born Americans. And that's bore out by the statistics, right? Or telling, you know, duly elected women who were born in this country and who are American citizens to go back to whatever disease-infested, blah, 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 rat-infested country that they came from. I mean, the dude's a fucking racist, right? So when you support somebody, you know, ripping babies from their moms at the border, there have been 24, at least as of right now, 24 migrants who have died in, you know, ICE or Border Patrol custody since Trump has taken office, in large part because of his policies. Almost exclusively because of his policies at this point. 6 children have died. So, look, man, at the end of the day, if you're okay with that, if you say you're okay with that, then you are saying, yeah, you know, while I might not take action against immigrants or people of color, I don't care if somebody else does it. God damn it, you're fucking racist then. You know, at least on some degree. Maybe you're not a full-blown racist, but fuck you, you're racist in some way. So between those two things, this is how I'm going to wrap this part up. Between those two things, because now, you know, now that fundamentally opposes my beliefs, right? So I am a hardcore, you know, leftist, progressive Democrat. You know, I mean, Democrat's my official political affiliation. I am not I do not follow the majority of, you know, Democrats. I am a progressive Democrat. I think the establishment has corrupted the Democratic Party very deeply as well. But anyway, point is, that very fundamentally opposes, you know, my beliefs. And so when you add that on top of the fact that at this point, you know, I feel like he's incapable of making the correct football decisions. And look, I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. I was trying to give him, you know, one last hurrah, one last chance to kind of get it right, you know, whatever. But then when you add this on top of it, I just can't. So for me, I'm done with Stephen Ross. He needs to step down as owner. Kenny Stills and other people, especially other players and stuff. I mean, Jesus Christ, you know, he did just hire a fucking black coach. The coach needs to say something about this. Like, this is not good. This is not okay, right? Like, it's super contradictory. It's a major data point that is super contradictory to everything that he has, you know, apparently and publicly stood up for to this point. So, you know, more people need to say something about this. This needs to get hashed out. And for me, at this point, you know, if the team and the coaches and whatever, you know, want to forgive him and so on and so forth, that's up to them. That's their prerogative. And their decision to make. For me, I'm done with him. Stephen Ross needs to step down as owner. You know, He needs to give it up. Somebody else needs to take over as majority owner of the Dolphins. And that's it. That's my perspective at this point, and it's very unlikely to change because of, the aforementioned factors. So, getting to the main thing, because I have now, gone for quite some time on that, a little bit longer than I wanted to, but things needed to be said. So I want to get to the main thing, and it is obviously Dolphins relevant, so whatever. But let's get to the main thing, and that is the Dolphins depth chart. So, and obviously, this is specifically and most relevant to the upcoming game tomorrow. And so, obviously this is not necessarily what's going to be the case for the preseason or the season opener in a few weeks. So, we'll keep an eye on it and see how it develops. But as of right now, Ryan Fitzpatrick is the starter. Josh Rosen is the backup with Jake Rudock as, the third string. And I think, overall, that makes the most sense. Ryan Fitzpatrick is the veteran guy. Blah, blah, blah. Jake Rudock obviously is going to be the number 3. Nobody's going to argue that. The question really would be between Ryan Fitzpatrick and Josh Rosen. So look, at the end of the day, I think really for me, as far as that goes, I don't know. It's hard for me to say, because at the end of the day, I feel like and I've said this, I feel like what's going to happen is they will both play significant amount of playing time during the season. So, what my inclination was going to be is that they should both play, a good amount of time, maybe just split the time equal, or whatever. And that's it, right? So, like, in this game, let's say the starters play 2 series, right? Let's say they play 2 series. You give Fitzpatrick one series and Rosen the other series. Period. And then it's done. And then Jake Rudock can go, prove that he deserves to be on a roster somewhere, right? And then, game 2, you just split it evenly. So, if you have an even number of series that you want to play, whatever, split that. If you have a certain amount of time that you want the starters to play, split that, whatever. But figure out however you want to do it. Give them, as equal time as you possibly can to evaluate which one you're going to want to be. Up to this point, though, also, Fitzpatrick has been proclaimed the starter. That could have just been in reference to this upcoming game, but it did sound like Brian Flores meant the season as well. All expectations are that will be the case. But I also feel that the offensive line is going to end up being woeful, and either one of them, both of them, whenever they do play, and this is part of the reason why both of them will get significant playing time, because the offensive line is going to be so bad. But they're both going to end up being miserable back there. They're going to get beat up all day. They're going to have, errant throws. They're going to have picks. They're not going to move the ball. They're going to get 3 and out all the time, and it's just going to be a big mess. So, God, man, all right, what do I want for the quarterback position? Look, like I said, at the end of the day, from my perspective, neither one of these guys are going to be the franchise, right? We just know Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't, because he's just an average at best quarterback. He's a good backup, but that's really it. He's old as fuck now, right? So we know Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't. The hope is that Josh Rosen will be. And Under different circumstances, I think maybe, possibly, he could be. But I think that this was the worst place for him to come after getting the boot from Arizona, because all of the problems that he had there are going to resume here, if not be worse, right? So like, his offensive line was terrible last year. It's probably going to be exactly the same or worse this year. He had problems with, coaching staff, changing and so on and so forth. Already we've lost 2 coaches. One, the offensive line coach being fired, and Jim Caldwell, I believe, was a quarterback's coach. Jesus Christ. I think he was an assistant head coach and quarterbacks coach, if I remember correctly. So you lose your initially hired offensive line coach and a assistant head coach / quarterbacks coach. Bruh, I mean, the recipe is just, it's not a good setup, right? And then, so the offensive line's not going to be great. He's got flaws that he needs to work on, but he's not going to have the opportunity and the chance, man. And frankly, I'm going to use the same argument for him that I used for Tannehill, right? And that I did for his first 4 years, since he was the most sacked quarterback. I don't think you can properly evaluate. I think that there's a lot to be said. No, I mean, you can evaluate. Because Ryan Tannehill did some damn good things. Again, the facts are he holds tons of records for the Dolphins organization. He holds an NFL record. He has put up damn good numbers despite being the most sacked quarterback in the first 4 years of his career, so on and so forth. So, and Josh Rosen, didn't do as well as Ryan Tannehill did in his first year. He didn't get booted in year 2, despite the fact that Joe Philbin did not support Ryan Tannehill, right? So, I mean, look, Josh Rosen, I believe, has the potential to be a good quarterback. I think he could do some good things. It's not going to happen here. The recipe is so bad, and the situation is so bad for him that I'm telling you, man, it's not going to work out. But I do not want to go get a Tua Tagovailoa or a Justin Herbert in the first round next year. I want to use that first round pick on a fucking offensive lineman, which my guess will be even more of an issue and need this next draft, after we have been proven to that the offensive line this year is going to be shoddy at best. And that's being super generous from my current perspective. Again, my philosophy is to take a quarterback in the 3rd round or later, depending on your needs, how significant it is. And I'd say right now we don't have an adequate starter or backup. So, well, that's not true, because Ryan Fitzpatrick is a backup, and Josh Rosen certainly would be a damn good backup, although I think he is starting caliber, just not in these circumstances. And look, I suppose he even could be. Maybe you even do keep Josh Rosen and just address the fucking offensive line. Frankly, that's honestly, a potential possibility as well. Although, I personally, there are some things about Josh Rosen in particular that do concern me, right? His ability to make reads, and he holds onto the ball too long. Those are some things that he could work out since he's still a young guy, but those are concerns. Also, there have, when he was in Arizona, there was talk about attitude concerns. So we'll see. Everybody says he's super smart, but there have been also conflicting, reports, just in the sense of that he's struggling to pick certain things up, whatever. And that, that in and of itself is not a big deal, right? And some of those other things that, you know, he can work on and grow into, right, are not big deals in and of himself. It's when you put it all together, right? It's like making a pros and cons list, right? Like, I feel like people don't do this anymore, and this is what I talk about when I say you got to have full context, right? Like, people ignoring the full context is like somebody making a pros and cons list, right? And let's say the pros side has 8 things on it and the cons side has 10 things on it, right? That'd be like saying, okay, well, there are more cons, and so logically I shouldn't do whatever it is that I want to do, but man, I really want to do it, so I'm just going to go ahead and erase 3 of the cons on there so that the pros outweigh the cons. That's absolutely fucking ridiculous. And it's going to be a disaster because in reality, those cons still exist. So you can erase them as much as you want, but they're still there. And so, you know, all of those things start adding up. And then you add in the fact that the Cardinals, after taking him 10th overall the year before, just decided to fucking cut bait completely. That's crazy. Yes, they also fired their head coach after just a single season, which is also super crazy to me. But I mean, it does, you know, it's a piece of context, right? And then there's also his performance, which is a little bit more tangible, you know, last year. So, you know, you add all that in. I'd rather take and you know, now he's 2 years into the league. Next year will be his 3rd year, right? So personally, I'd rather just take a younger, fresher guy who doesn't have all of that stuff, right? In the 3rd round next year, and in the 1st round take an offensive lineman. Fuck, at this point, maybe even take an offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds. Right, because I think that we're going to be proven, I think that I'll be proven right, you know, after this season is over, and obviously throughout the season, that the offensive line is going to be so bad that we're going to need to invest that kind of capital in it, right? That level of capital investment is warranted. It would not be warranted on taking like Tua Tagovailoa or what have you. So yeah, so there's that. That's how I feel about quarterback. Whatever. So moving on, then we have running back. Kenyon Drake is slated as the starter with Kalen Ballage behind him, Mark Walton behind him, and Chandler Cox behind him in 4th. So that's interesting because first and foremost, Chandler Cox is 4th. He's a fullback though, and we know he's going to be used because they are going to employ, you know, him in such a fashion that, like they did in New England with fullbacks. Brian Flores comes from New England. This is the first time we've had a fullback on our roster since fucking forever. They're going to use him, right? So he's 4th on the depth chart, but he's going to get used a lot. Kalen Ballage is 2nd, but all throughout training camp, he's been ahead of Kenyon Drake. Now, I do think, I just read an article about how the author thinks that Kenyon Drake is going to be used in a James White fashion where he's more the receiving back. And I think that is correct. And I think that's honestly the smart thing to do. Give Kenyon Drake some runs. You know, some of those, like I said, some of those, you know, pitches to the outside or, you know, outside runs, you know, what have you. Maybe where, you know, you pull the guard, the backside guard to the outside, whatever. But Kalen Ballage is going to be short yardage. He's going to be goal line. He's going to be, you know, the 1st and 2nd down back for the most part, right? I think. And I do think that is the right way to use those guys. So give credit to the coaching staff there and what have you. So, and I don't think the starting lineup, whatever, in for that position really even matters. Because like I said, I think Kenyon Drake and Kalen Ballage are both going to get a lot of playing time. I think that they're both going to see the ball plenty. Chandler Cox is going to see playing time. I don't know that he's going to see the ball ever. He might, we might see him get a couple throughout the season just to switch it up and confuse people. I do think that's actually a legit possibility. So, at the end of the day, I think it's highly likely, in fact, that we will see him get a few touches, but not much. He's mostly going to be there as a blocker and so on and so forth. But he is going to be used. So I don't think that the depth chart necessarily means anything in regard to the running back position. Now let's move on to the wide receivers. The starters appear to be Kenny Stills, Devontae Parker, and Albert Wilson, with Jakeem Grant, Bryce Butler, and Allen Hurns behind them, and Preston Williams and Isaiah Ford rounding out the group on the back end. Honestly, that seems right to me, based off of various different things, right? Production, veteran status, draft status. There's different factors, and obviously different factors apply to different guys. Contract situation, what have you. Tenure on the team, various things, right? So there's lots of different factors, and different ones apply to different guys. But I think that with the way that they have this shaking out going into this preseason game, I would say that's correct, and that's how it should be. And honestly, as far as the running backs and the wide receivers go, if that's how it stood into the regular season, I would say, yeah, that makes sense. And then obviously, but Jakeem Grant and Bryce Butler are both going to for sure get playing time. They're going to get targets, so on and so forth. Allen Hurns probably will too. Preston Williams very well could, right? I mean, honestly, this is that's 6, 7, 8 receivers. Almost all of them really could get playing time at some point, especially if guys get hurt, which, Devontae Parker's had, injury history. Albert Wilson and Jakeem Grant just both had injury problems, and Jakeem Grant right now is got a little something bothering him and is, questionable, right? So Isaiah Ford has had, an injury in the past. So guys can get hurt, and, wide receiver is a position where that does happen pretty regularly. So all of these guys could get playing time, and I like all of these guys really for the most part. I mean, you guys know how I feel about Devontae Parker at this point in time. I think that what's best for him and the team is to move on and for him to go somewhere else. But he's here, and he's going to be one of our starting receivers, at least, initially. Although I will say that, based off of the information that I have right now, I do think that this makes sense right now. I think it's logical. I think it probably should be the case going into the season, but I think that there is a high probability that Devontae Parker, just based off of, his track record and so on and so forth, that Devontae Parker could continue down the path that he's gone up to this point and disappoint during the season. And if that's the case, then I would absolutely love to see somebody step up, and I could see it being a guy like Preston Williams. A young guy with a lot to prove, similar body type and play style as Devontae Parker, but seems to want it more. And he's younger. He's a few years younger. He was, he wasn't even a draft pick. He was, I believe Preston Williams was an undrafted guy. I could be wrong about that, so if I am, check me, please, and I'll check on that. But honestly, I would like him to go forward and be the future of this franchise, so to speak, in that regard, right, and take over that role. And then after this year, just let Devontae Parker go somewhere else, right? Because the way his contract is designed is, if I'm correct about this is they actually could get out of it next year without having too many financial ramifications, or whatever. So, let it play out. Obviously, it has to play out at this point. But if he does end up disappointing, which I'm not saying is going to happen necessarily, but I do think that there's a high probability. And so then you get a guy like maybe Preston Williams to come in and take over that role. Next you have tight ends. So Dwayne Allen is the leader right now with Nick O'Leary, Mike Gesicki and Durham Smythe following up behind them. Again, I think with this one, overall that makes sense because obviously Gesicki and Durham are still very young. They're still super fresh. They didn't, at the end of the day, and obviously this may not be entirely their fault because, they were asked to block a lot last year, especially once, the offensive line got battered and so on and so forth. And this is more, right now, this point is a little bit more towards Gesicki, right? Because he's the pass-catching guy. He was asked to do things that are not really his strong suit. And he needs to, of course. He needs to be able to do that. But, they're both young. They're only in their second year. They're not really that proven, right? Dwayne Allen and Nick O'Leary are the veteran guys. They have a lot more experience. They know the game. And they have... certainly more production than those other guys. So I think that makes sense. But ideally, you want to see, obviously, Mike Gesicki and Durham Smythe work their way up. Eventually, I would say you would want that to flip, right? So you would want, let's say Gesicki is the starter with Smythe behind him, and then, Nick O'Leary and Dwayne Allen in whatever fucking order you want after that. That's how you would want it to be at some point, right? But as of right now, how it stands, I think that does make sense. All right, now for the offensive line. So the starters are going to be left tackle Laramie Tunsil, left guard Michael Dieter, center Daniel Kilgore, my bad, Daniel Kilgore, right guard Dion Calhoun. I don't even know who that is, really, but he has been the guy though in the starting lineup the past couple days. And then Jesse Davis at right tackle. So Laramie Tunsil, I trust him. I don't trust Michael Dieter yet, because what reason do I have to trust him? He hasn't shown anything. So honestly, but at the same time, I'm not criticizing him. I'm not saying he can't do it or whatever. He just has to prove, right? He just doesn't. He's never done it in the NFL. This is his first opportunity. He's gonna get a shot. He was our third round pick. They're gonna give him the opportunity. He has to take up that mantle, and he's got to prove it. So it's just a question mark. It's not a good or bad. It's just a question mark. So we'll see. Daniel Kilgore, I trust him as a player. His health is a bit of a concern. Dion Calhoun, I don't know a fucking thing about him. Big question mark there at right guard. Jesse Davis at right tackle. I like the kid. I love him as a person. I like him as a football player. He hasn't done right tackle before, so that's a bit of a concern. Even last year at guard, and even, the year before that and stuff at guard, it was a real mixed bag. So, I like Jesse Davis, but still a question mark. So, especially at right tackle, because we just don't know. He's never done it, right? So, or very little, right? Maybe, he's probably done it a bit in the past, and I'm pretty sure he has, pushed out there a little bit, but I mean, I don't know. That offensive line though, man, I have to say, just fucking, it concerns me so much. And then the backups are Zach Stirrup for left tackle, Chris Reed for left guard, Kyle Fuller for center, Will Holden right guard, Jordan Mills at right tackle, and then Isaiah Prince is the only third string lineman as of right now. Man, look, I mean, those backups are super underwhelming. Bruh, that offensive line scares me. Anyway, give me a second. This part I'm going to go ahead and edit out of the motherfucking shit. I just need to blow my nose so bad. Alright, so now let's go ahead and move on to the defense. Man, dude, and look. See, and here's another thing. So, right now, let's see. There's 11 positions on offense, 11 positions on defense. Right now, there's 11, 22... 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. There are 30 offensive players on this. We're obviously, we'll count out, you know, special teams, which is just Jason Sanders, Matt Hawk, and John Denny. So 3 guys. But there are 30, and then there's 33, 34, 35 defensive players. So there's 5 extra defensive players on the roster. And I think that we have more corners than we probably need. I mean, looking at this, we might even have like more linebackers than we need. I mean, my point is simply with that is God damn it, we need so much help on the offensive line. Like, it's like what I was saying before. Look, we have like 8 or so cornerbacks, some shit like that in camp and in this preseason. Why do we need that many? Like, seriously, we need more help on the offensive line. You should have brought in more, and I don't know. Anyway, whatever. So let's get to the defense though. So starters for defensive end are going to be, according to this, Charles Harris and Tank Carradine. So, you know, Charles Harris obviously still has a lot to prove. He's getting, you know, closer to the end of his contract, his rookie contract, and thus, in my opinion, open for, you know, full evaluation, because I believe that you got to give a guy his rookie contract before you can do that. But he definitely has to step up, man, and he's got a lot to prove. And I think defensive end, as I've said, for our defense is probably our weakest position. Tank Carradine has been coming on in training camp, but up to this point, he's been kind of a nobody in the NFL. So we'll see how that goes. Behind them is Nate Orchard, Jonathan Woodard, Jonathan Ledbetter, and Dwayne Hendricks. So yeah, I mean, our defensive end position as of right now is just a giant mystery and leaves a lot to be desired. Defensive tackle Devon Godshaw and Christian Wilkins makes sense to me, and I love those guys, and I think they're going to be great. I love Godshaw, and I think, you know, like I said, the pick of Wilkins, number 1 overall for us, or no, number 1 for us, not number 1 overall, but in the first round for us. Again, it's nothing against the player. I just don't think that was the proper way to handle the draft, and they should have taken a different position, i.e. an offensive lineman. But I like the kid. I like his potential and his ability and stuff like that. So I like those 2 starters. I love Vincent Taylor and Akeem Spence behind them. Adolphus Washington and Joey Imubu. I don't know anything about Joey Imubu. Adolphus Washington, I know, is a veteran guy. And, you know, that's cool. You know, I mean, you need some some depth. I think defensive tackle we're really good at. Like, I'm not worried about that. I think we have and obviously there's going to be a rotation, and with Vincent Taylor and Akeem Spence coming in that rotation, I love it. I think it's good. Linebacker, we have Kiko Alonso, who's apparently questionable right now, Sam Aguavian, and Jerome Baker, who is also apparently questionable. And so look, our defense is taking a bit of a battering. Right now, real quick, just a quick side note, this is according to ESPN right now. This is the depth chart that ESPN has up. It was the first, reputable source that I saw when I searched this. The people who are questionable right now: Jakeem Grant, Dwayne Allen, Jonathan Woodard, Kiko Alonso, Jerome Baker, Rashad Jones, Raekwon McMillan, and Eric Rowe. Those are big, important names, both starters and depth options. First and second string guys already into, and that doesn't even account for Chase Allen and Mike Hull, Cordray Tankersley, right? So, we're getting pretty battered, and we haven't even played a preseason game. So, I think that may end up playing a pretty big factor too in a very disappointing season. So we'll see, and obviously something we have to keep an eye on. But the starters, though, our weak side is Kiko, which I think is good. Strong side is Jerome Baker, which I think is good. The middle linebacker is Sam Aguavian, the new guy, over Raekwon McMillan, which is very interesting. And something we'll definitely have to keep an eye on as things go forward. That is fascinating. I mean, I don't really know what to make of it, but it's just initial impressions would be is that they don't think as highly of Raekwon McMillan as they do of Sam Aguavian. I mean, it's just the first preseason game, so that's not necessarily the case, but that's just the first impression based off of this. And so, the second string is Andrew Van Ginkel, Raekwon McMillan, and Chase Allen, with Tyrone Holmes, Terrell Hanks, and Trey Watson. I don't know any of those third string guys, but they're camp bodies and whatever. Whatever. They're just hoping to maybe possibly stick somewhere. The middle linebacker thing, Sam Aguavian over Raekwon, is probably the only real interesting thing. I think Kiko Alonso and Jerome Baker make sense, and then Van Ginkel and Chase Allen, and certainly McMillan if he's not going to be in the starting lineup as a backup. So I guess overall that makes sense. My initial impression would be that McMillan would be the starter at middle linebacker, but we'll see. I guess the coaching staff sees something, and obviously they see a lot of things that I don't. So we'll see. Let's see if Sam can work that middle, and let's see how it goes. So at safety, it looks like Rashad Jones is the strong safety, with Bobby McCain as the free safety. Behind them is TJ McDonald and Montre Hardage, and Maury Smith, and then Walt Aikens. Okay. And then for corners, you have Xavier Howard and Eric Rowe. That's what I would expect. Although I thought Montre Hardage was a corner and has been doing good things, so I thought maybe he could unseat Eric Rowe. But Nick Needham is behind Eric Rowe, and he also has been doing some good things. But also, it's funny because Minkah Fitzpatrick is listed as second string behind Xavier Howard at corner. I don't know, man. Some of this stuff seems a little strange to me. You're taking a natural cornerback and somebody who's super good at slot and putting him as a free safety, and maybe it works. And then you're taking a guy who's best at free safety and putting him in as a cornerback. I don't know. We'll see. And then Torrey McTyer, Jamal Wiltz, Cordray Tankersley, and Cornell Armstrong round out the corners there. So On defense, there's some interesting things, and then obviously the place kickers, Jason Sanders, punter, Matt Hawk, the holder, Matt Hawk, punt return, Jakeem Grant, kick return, Kenyon Drake with Isaiah Ford behind him, and long snapper, John Denny. So yeah, overall, I think on offense, it makes sense. There's the couple injury concerns with Jakeem Grant and Dwayne Allen. The offensive line is going to probably be just atrocious. Defense, most of it makes sense. There is the interesting thing to keep an eye on with the middle linebacker, with the defensive ends. And then, you know, on the back end is really interesting with Bobby McCain going to free safety. Minka right now listed as, you know, a backup cornerback. Although this is a base 4-3 defense with, you know, only 2 corners and whatever, blah, 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 whatever. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot to keep an eye on. There are definitely some concerns, both in the regard of like injuries as well as, you know, quality of play in some areas. You know, there's the interest and intrigue with how they're moving guys around, who's, you know, a couple places where guys are starting over other guys. And so look, I'm really excited for tomorrow's game. I'm going to obviously be paying super close attention. I haven't decided if I'm going to do a live stream quite yet. I think it's likely. I think I still need to figure out though how I'm going to watch the game and everything. But I'll make that decision sometime tonight, obviously, and then it'll be a surprise for you guys tomorrow if I do or if I don't. But either way, though, obviously I will be making a video after the game. Normally the day before a game, so today in this case, I would make a preview video, but it's the first preseason game, and like, yes, the Atlanta Falcons played in the Hall of Fame game, and, you know, you could watch tape, but a lot of their starters didn't play, like, at all. So, I mean, I'm not even going to worry about it. Like, there's really no point. It's first preseason game, whatever. So, we play the Atlanta Falcons tomorrow in preseason game 1. There's your preview for it. I hope that's adequate. You know, obviously, I probably won't do a lot in that regard as far as the preseason goes, but, you know, a little bit more. You know, it'll get a little bit more in depth, obviously, as the preseason progresses and we get further into it, and we, you know, can evaluate the team and the roster and so on and so forth more. But then, obviously, once live action really starts and it counts towards records, I'll be making preview videos and then, you know, post-game videos as well, and probably be doing, for those, I'll definitely be doing, you know, I mean, unless I go watch the game, like, outside my house, I'll definitely be doing live for the games, live streams for the game. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and end it there, guys. I hope you guys enjoy my videos. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section, and of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.